Okay, so the following conversation that you'll hear is starts with this email from a client in New York. He says, after watching your video on the Dexter DB1000, so that's a deadbolt. I'm going to insert as I go along here. The Dexter DB1000 is a traditional tubular deadbolt made by or branded under the name Dexter. Dexter is a name that's been around for decades, known as residential hardware. In my website, actually, there's likely an old catalog. Let me actually look if there is. If you type in the name Dexter, when you get to the manufacturer's page, I think I have the catalog in my possession. I've just not scanned it yet. I think I have a mid-20th century Dexter catalog just for fun. But the DB1000 is, let's take a look. It's a grade 1 deadbolt. Okay. So the DB, that's the important part. The grade 1 deadbolt is that it's been rated to 1,000,000 cycles, is the bottom line. I was clearly not aware of that initially because I go on to tell the client avoid grade 2 deadbolts if you're looking for physical security. So the client says, after watching your video on the Dexter DB1000, I thought I would write to ask for your assistance in putting together a possible order for 3 locks, control keys, so interchangeable core, and keys. The lock in question is the DB2000, which is probably a double cylinder. The lock body is the SFIC version, which is small format interchangeable core, patented by and popularized by the Best company. That technology's been around for over 100 years. So the client wants double cylinder because I know that he mentions that he has side lights or something like that. So the client says for 3 doors, he wants 3 of them as noted. I believe this means I will need 6 SFIC cores. It would. The cores I hope you can provide are the Schalge Everest 29 Primus XP. The bottom line is that is a particular platform by Schalge that is going to be a restricted keyway that's going to have both a shear line at the top of the cylinder plug and one in the side of the cylinder plug as well to accommodate what would be the Everest 29 Primus XP part of all of that. It has a side bit milling. So you've got 2 shear lines. I know that the client wants to deter bumping, and 2 shear lines will certainly, I would have to say, will render bumping not a means of bypass that would be that you'd be able to exploit. And then he goes on to talk about just the quantity of keys, sure. And then he goes on to say that he hopes that he can select the bitting for the pins in these cores, is that all 6 cores can be key bitted the same. Yeah, the client, we go into that in the conversation near the end where I question, why do you want to define the bidding? 1, why? 2, do you know what you're doing? There's a lot of science behind what would be considered more appropriate bidding as a master key or to deter bumping, perhaps. But I wouldn't leave that decision in the hands of a layman, as he states it. If I can select 7-pin cores, I don't think you can in Schalge. If they're small format, you can. Okay, so I questioned the client and said, hey, why such a low-end deadbolt? Why such a low-end deadbolt with a restricted key? And then why small format? Why not something of better technology? Meaning that so why such a low-end deadbolt? Dexter is not a name that I think about when it comes to brute force attack resistance. It's a grade 1 deadbolt. It's clearly been tested to 1,000,000 cycles. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to survive a brute force attack in a superior way to something that's going to most certainly be a more expensive deadbolt, something made by Sargent or a Schalge B600 series or the Kaba 45 series or anything by Best, stuff that's just going to be more robust. That will probably cycle 1,000,000 times without failure, but physically attacking it. So we're just talking about that right now, meaning bringing up the idea. Why such a low-end deadbolt? I would personally, if physical security is what you wanted, I would probably say I need to render this deadbolt as undefeatable as possible. The restricted key, I ask, why a restricted key? Why do you need a restricted key? Why small format? Why? I mean, how does it serve the operational description? And why not something with better technology? It's certainly what I was meaning there was a key platform that's going to give you more than just those two shear lines. And that patent for that Schalge Primus, that goes back to the 80s. So if you were to look at Medico 4, X4, whatever they call it, Medico 4, I think it's called now, multi-lock, the MTL 800, there's stuff with, if you're going to do it, why not do it with something that's not 80s technology? And, and that's somewhat unfair. Sure, that patent for that side bit milling is the ASA Twin and the Schalge Primus. All the technology is decades old because in locksmithing, it's just one advancement literally is created on the shoulders of the prior advancement. So it's definitely that saying where when you not copy someone, but when you take what someone else has done for inspiration, it's the highest form of compliment. Copying is not the right word, but that's locksmithing. When you take someone's technology and you improve on it, it's really a compliment to the first person. So that's what I'm really going for with that. I ask those questions to the client, and he sends a pretty epic response. Let's go through that pretty epic response right now.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Okay, let's go over the follow-up from the client. Please accept my attempt to answer your questions so that hopefully you can assist me in choosing a lock set and cylinder that will accomplish what I hope. Like many, I'm trying to walk the line balancing security and affordability. I live in an area that is low crime with many police patrols because a small private college campus nearby. Okay. Campus security also goes down my block and has their own security cameras on the streets. My house also has what amounts to layered security with cameras. Okay. In addition, most doors and windows are under direct view from my neighbors and the aforementioned patrols. Having said that, even with that comfort, there is an issue that two of my doors have thin glass panels that are too easy to break, reach in, and unlock the quick set locks currently in place. Okay. I will certainly not be the first person to confide to you that the various lockpicking websites, and more importantly, the bump key videos make any choice seem like a waste of time and money. So I am operating on the idea these locks keep an honest person out and serve the function of purchasing time delay for the possible thief, which hopefully makes the would-be burglar choose another house. Yeah, break it anywhere, just not this house. Here in Southwest Florida, hurricanes, great, anywhere but here. Moving on. Lockpicking is not my main concern. I believe that there may be more skill required than a would-be burglar and time than a burglar wants to commit. On the other hand, lock bumping appears to be very fast and more easily done and is therefore my primary concern. After that comes forceful entry, with drilling the lock being easy now with small portable drills. Kicking in the door, of course, remains an option, but that one action is accompanied by noise and my neighbors have a good view of the front door. Only the back door is partially shielded and potentially vulnerable. So the client gives me their circumstances, their environment, then goes on to answer my why small format interchangeable core and a restricted key. He says, the SFIC seems to be a way of creating a hybrid lock, i.e., where the lock body is of sufficient strength to resist brute force attack. Not necessarily at all. In fact, I would say that it might be not so. You're creating a large hole in the face of the deadbolt itself for that cylinder. The restricted key is to reduce the chance that a bump key will be more easily obtained. Well, that's for sure. If you can't get a restricted key, means the blanks are restricted. If you can't get your hand on the key blank, you can't make a bump key. I assume, perhaps incorrectly, that any thief will have a Schalge keyway bump key. I guess. I think a bump key, as I mentioned in the audio, I'm an ALOA certified professional locksmith. I don't ever think of bump keys. I don't know that I've ever actually, years ago when everyone was talking about bump keys, there's something called the Dayton method, which is a lot less obvious that I've gotten into your space. Um, I may have played around with a bump key. It's just a key cut to the deepest cut within the system. Schalge C is probably the second most common keyway in all of North America. Quickset is probably the most common. Getting a Schalge Quickset blank, that's as easy as pilfering one from your Home Depot store, which I'm not saying, which I would, of course, be thoroughly opposed to and would advise everyone against such a thing. The point of the matter is they're very easily obtained. You could, here's a better way to say it. You could call me right now and order as many skid loads of Schalge C 5-pin that you want, blanks. And he goes on to say, such a thief may not have a more restricted key. Yeah, great. I would say that will be no chance, unless, of course, they 3D printed it, which, and let's just take it aside. Never, never give anyone your keys. Never. Never surrender them to someone else. If you do, if you give me your key ring, say, oh, go ahead and open up the garage door, and you give me your key ring without knowledge, it would not be much of a challenge for me to copy that key without your knowledge. So I find the first thing to do when it comes to security is never surrender your key to begin with. Initially, I was thinking more along the lines of a Schalge B62. Okay, that's Schalge's double cylinder, light duty, standard duty commercial, maybe a B62. And then for more security pins and bump resistance, the B562. I don't see any difference between a B62 and a B562 when it comes to bump resistance. That led me to the Schalge sister company Dexter and my review of the Dexter Deadbolt. I must have done a Dexter Deadbolt review at some point. Because of the single pane glass doors, a double-sided deadbolt or one with a captive key seemed a good choice. Let's talk about captive key. A captive key is you put the key in, you've got a double cylinder deadbolt. On the outside, you got a key. On the inside, you got a key. Captive key means you can take a special key and insert it into the inside half, and now it becomes a thumb turn. Only the use of a special tool allows you to remove that captive key, put it away, and now you've got a double cylinder deadbolt again. Where you would use that is when you want to have a single cylinder deadbolt sometimes and a double cylinder deadbolt sometimes. Glass side lights, break it, reach in, I'm in, pull that captive key out when you go on vacation, store it away. There are other reasons why you could use that. And I'm thinking of, you don't want to ever keep someone inside the house from going out, but there are times when you want to keep someone inside from going out. The elderly that you're caring for, a toddler, because a lot of people have levers these days. Okay. And if that deadbolt's not bolted, that toddler can reach up, pull that lever down. Oh, now the door's open. So there are times when you want, in my actual experience. The client talks about a captive key. That's the purpose of it. A lot of people, many, many people. And you could do it with Schalge in the sense that you'd have a construction key. Basically, a construction key, take a key, cut it in half. Take that first tip, stick it in the inside cylinder. You can then take the other half of the key and stick it in, and that will operate it until you take that little half key out. Now nothing will work there. So you could do it with Schalge as well. Client talks about Medico. I think Multilock has one. I know Cobb and Ilco does for their cylinders. So the client goes on to talk about a Medico captive key. I think he just found the Medico because he was looking for a captive key. He says that he's not educated enough to understand the differences between various captive key models. I don't think it really matters. The key's either in or it's not. And then he has some trepidation regarding this lock. He goes on to say it's at the upper end of my budget, given I am purchasing 3 of them. Finally, regarding this lock, I am unsure if the DL keyway provided the bump key protection I was looking for. Medico is not going to advertise their broachings, their millings, their keyways. When it comes to bump key protection, if you can't get a blank, you can't make a bump key. Unless you 3D print. That does exist. This thinking led me to the idea of a hybrid lock, using a strong lock body with universal cylinder acceptance, such as small format, and something like the Schalge Everest 29 Primus XP, which has a keyway patent that doesn't expire till 2029. I don't know if that's when it expires, but it's probably still under active patent. And all that's doing is giving you a second share line. That share line where the pins are, and then in the side bit milling. But at that point, it doesn't have to be Everest 29 Primus XP. It could just be an OG Primus. The issue with stuff that's not under patent protection is if you called me for a Schalge CP Primus blank, I can sell those to you. No problem. It's got side bit milling. The issue, though, is that the side bit milling is different for different levels. So just because I can sell you a Schalge Primus key blank and a C keyway doesn't mean it's the one that will work that well. He goes on to say, begs forgiveness that he's a layperson. Choosing locks is like an unending rabbit hole, et cetera, et cetera. And then his brain just kept going with investigating patents. I asked him, why not something with better technology? I'm literally thinking about multi-lock, the MTL 800, patent protection till the end of the 2030s, multiple different technologies happening on there. That if you're really looking for, in my opinion, the most secure key platform, just go for it. Then he goes on to say that he may not need all three of these deadbolts. He might be able to live with something here and a little different here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he goes on to talk about the Abloy ProTech 2. The Abloy ProTech is an incredibly intriguing cylinder platform. It's beautiful. Look up the Abloy ProTech or whatever the current version, ProTech 2, ProTech 12, I don't know what it is. I've got a ProTech cylinder in my lock collection, and it is, if you've ever seen, my father-in-law had a Jaguar in the 90s, and that key was kind of like a rectangle, and it had oblique cuts on it and long. That's what a ProTech key looks like. So when you stick it in there, it's got all these discs with different cuts inside the disc, and it all has to line up just perfectly with the gates that are probably cutting those discs. So they work really awesome. You're not going to get that key blank. And even if you could, you have no way of cutting because you don't have the machine. Like with the MTL 800 from Multilock, as I say to the client in the audio, I own the 609B keyway from Multilock. Blah, blah, blah. That means particular things are done to that key to make it my keyway. As a authorized Multilock distributor, I own my own keyway. There are only two people that can cut that key with the right credentials, me and the factory, because, and they're CNC machines, by the way, that cut those. Meaning, if you go to another locksmith and you've got your credential, their machine won't even turn on. Meaning, this stuff is really locked down. As a distributor, I'm not allowed, even if I wanted to, sell blanks to someone. And they're always going to have my keyway cut into them anyway. So you're not going to ever make a bump key out of it. You could have the MTL 800 blank for my stock, but unless that person, it's just impossible. It doesn't exist. So at the end of the day, I go on to tell the client in the conversation, in my opinion, this is really all about nothing. That bump resistance can be reasonably accomplished with spool pins or mushroom pins. And at the end of the day, I would just have an alarm because any deadbolt is going to succumb to me kicking the door. Any cylinder I can drill into. So cameras, okay, you can see a hooded person coming in your door at 1:04 a.m. on a Sunday morning. But the old saying is you can't beat the Motorola. Can't move faster than the speed of light. Those radio waves are going out to the police once your ADT calls the police station. So if you're really concerned about it, you need to have it line. That's the way. I think you need to have good physical security and be mindful of that because that works. You need to be able to control who has rights and privileges to the space, meaning who's got a key that will work or some key. A key can be anything. The definition of key is a tool that's used to remove a blockage. A crowbar is a key because it will remove the blockage. The blockage is the bolt in the jam. My shoe is a key. I can kick the door open and split the wood. My bump key could be a key because it will remove the blockage. And then, of course, the operating key. The cameras and the ADTs of the world is part of that. So I would consider that all. Once a year, I get someone who wants to have a philosophical conversation about this stuff. It always comes back to the same answer. Yes, you want good physical security. You want good security otherwise, especially if you have something worth locking. But at the end of the day, if you're looking to have all of this stuff with fancy words, Schalge Everest 29 Primus XP and Obloy Protect 2 and whatever fancy words the gentleman comes up with, you're on a budget. You're better off taking the hundreds of dollars that you'll spend and just get an alarm subscription. That's my suggestion. Because at least the police are. Anyway, I hope this is of some help somewhere. I'm not discouraging conversation about it, but the answer from me always is the same. Good physical security, good electronic security. Depending on your application, you might want one or the other, or just simply both. Thank you very much.
Architectural Builder's Supply is pleased to present you with this recording.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
Okay, let's try that again. I'm having phone trouble here. You're working on small format. Okay, so what do you want to accomplish?
Okay, so that's what was in the longish email that I wrote back to you in response. So I'll verbally go through what I wrote. So because of the videos I had seen on lock bumping and lock picking, I was concerned about that. I was less concerned about lock picking. I don't think that that is a viable thing to be terribly concerned about where I live. I'm not saying it's a non-issue, but it's not the major one. Lock bumping, on the other hand, because of how fast it can be, even though my doors are in view of my neighbors and the police patrols that come by here, and it's a good neighborhood at very low crime, lock bumping is such a fast thing that that's something that might be able to be done. So there I was looking at, okay, so what keys are more restricted and therefore aren't going to be on the key ring of somebody walking around? And that's where the SFIC idea came in. Okay, the high security locks that have restricted keyways are too expensive to buy 3 locks. At least that's not really what the budget is that I have for this. So then what seemed to make sense was, okay, so what's a pretty strong lock body that is going to be able to resist the brute force entry, something like the Schalge 562, for example, or the sister company, the Dexter. And it was your review on the DB1000 that had me want to communicate with you. And so the idea of getting one of the cylinderless SFIC lock body and then putting in a better, higher security, more restricted keyway to address lock bumping seemed to be a way to go. But I'm a layperson, and so therefore as a layperson, I could be thinking stuff that is to the side of the point, not actually on the point. And it might be that the medical lock, there was one that you had, I put the link into my email to you, that had a captive key, was adequate to the task. And the problem I had with that, aside from the fact that that's getting up to the limit if I bought 3 of them financially, the problem I had with that one is it seemed to be that that keyway was in the public domain, and therefore what would that mean in terms of lock bumping? But it might be that that lock is still resistant. So the reason why I picked that medical with the captive key is I have 2 doors with single pane glass where it would be very easy to just reach in and turn a thumb screw. That's why I was looking for a double-sided lock in the first place. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the captive key allows you to have a thumb turn there when you want and have a double cylinder when you go on vacation, that kind of stuff.
Precisely. Exactly.
Yeah. Do you really think bumping is actually a threat that you need to guard against?
The answer is, to my knowledge, in a way, no. And the reason why I say in a way no is because this area has very low crime. I don't know of, there was somebody trying to get into somebody's garage a few months ago. But other than that, in the 2.5 years I've been here, nothing. And I happen to be lucky to be located across the street from a very nice, small, private college. And campus security comes down here all the time. They have cameras there. I have my own cameras. And the police come down here just because it's a convenient street for their patrol. They're not patrolling this street because it has something that they're watching out for. And so in that respect, and all my doorways have views to my neighbors. One has a partially obstructed view. So that's what I was saying in terms of the concept of layered security. I have that. So I don't think it's a major thing, but it's the only thing that I'm vulnerable to. I mean, you're vulnerable to any house is vulnerable to anything. So I don't mean that, but I mean, that is the particular attack that it would seem I would be vulnerable to if a thief or a burglar came to this area and said, you know what, let's start targeting houses here. What would be the thing that would be the mechanism by which they would get in besides a window? If they were going to try a door, they might first see, is it unlocked? It's locked. Okay, so then what's the easiest thing to do next? I'm here at the front door. I'll just bump it and get in. I don't know. I can't think like a thief, but that's what I was thinking.
I agree that you can't. I'm at a low CPL, and that means that I've demonstrated proficiency on everything but the most highest of industry credentials, and it's because I'm incapable of developing those skills to be a CML. I've never had a client call, yep, they got in because they bumped me. They bumped it. So now, do you have an alarm?
I don't have an alarm.
Okay. So camera's not going to do anything. That's not security. That just records the fact that there was a hooded figure and when they entered. What I would do is, because in my opinion, the probability of someone coming up to your door and bumping it rather than using the master key that they already possess, which is their size 10 shoe, it's statistically zero. So to spend money to thwart that when I'm just going to kick the door in if I can't get in or come in another way, it's not worth spending the money on. And if you wanted to do a lot more to guard against bumping, take the cylinder out, take it to your local locksmith or mail it to me, and I will add spool pins. And that substantially reduces the possibility for bumping, substantially reduces. Now, I've seen videos of locksmiths get past all this stuff really, really quick, but you probably don't own anything worth getting the attention of someone with that skill set. And if you do, it's probably in some place that's actually secure. It's not your platinum day-date, Rolex that's sitting out on top of your vanity. So the bottom line
I wish I did own something like that, but no, I don't. Actually, you're right.
So
right.
Now, your idea is sound because what you're doing is you're introducing a second shear line, and that's what's going to thwart bumping. I just don't think that it's worth spending the money on. What you want to do is you may want to investigate having a key that can't be duplicated without your permission. That's fun. You give your key to the cleaning lady, and you know when you get it back, you've got back the only copy. But you also know that if they've lost it, you have no way to know whether it's out there. And the restricted cut keys become expensive when you have to rekey them. So if it was me, I'd put spool pins in, and I would have an alarm. Every single property that I own, there's an alarm, because that's the best way to thwart. When 120 decibels starts going off, it generally makes people run.
Yeah, the only issue I have with that, and I know it seems silly maybe, is if the alarm went off, because sometimes alarms go off because there's been a vibration or some other cause other than a break-in, and I'm, say, on vacation, and the distress it might cause the neighbors becomes an issue.
Well, all of my alarms can be accessed via the app. So if someone
Yeah.
gets a text to you and says, "Hey, man, your alarm's going off," well, you're like, "Well, yeah. Let me know when the police get there. I'll talk to them." But
Got it.
just my opinion. I mean, that's all that ADT stuff's done over a phone nowadays. But I encourage you to continue to explore this. I personally don't see a reason to go with the grade 2 locks that you've mentioned because they're grade 2 locks and they're not going to give you any additional level of physical protection against what you already have, unless you have something that's $15 from Lowe's. You know, it's more likely
that's exactly what they are. They're quick sets. They are the $8.99 quick sets is what they are.
Well, that's not their 600 series. I mean, that's their upgraded version. It's more likely that someone's going to use a crowbar and spread the frame open is what they're going to most likely do. That's the break-ins that I see. Residential construction, reasonably easy to bypass. I mean, if you have a key that someone cannot get because it's under patent protection, you can't make a bump key. And with a side bit milling like the Everest that you spoke about, you're not going to make a bump key. It's not going to happen. I mean, I guess it's possible. I've never heard of it. So that's all good. That will work. I think spool pins will probably do it. That'll cost a whole lot less. And if you look up spool pin, just like imagine what a spool of thread looks like and what the spool itself with the thread removed, that driver pin looks like that. That's why we call it that. Or a mushroom pin would be another a driver that could be used. I think that would sufficiently put your mind at ease, in my opinion. I'm happy to sell you all of this hardware. I don't think advising you to do so is in the best interest of the owner.
So then what would be the lock body that you'd be talking about then?
Well, the ones you selected are fine, but if it was like what I own, it's grade 1. You know, pick a manufacturer, but it's grade 1. Actually, you've already mentioned that there's a budget. Now, if it was me, I would be doing grade 1 and UL 437 listed, because that's going to give me UL 437 is a test criteria by which means of bypass, destructive and otherwise, have been physically applied to the lock that has been submitted for testing to Underwriters Laboratory. And if it's UL 437, it literally withstood a battery of things. One of those things is someone wrenching on it, hammering it.
Right.
Really neat stuff. But who's going to do that? You got neighbors. They're not noise.
Exactly.
You know, bumping doesn't make a lot of noise, but someone has to tap on the face of that cylinder.
So the Schalge 562, for example, is grade 2, but it's a pretty well-made lock. You don't. The 62 is a grade 1 lock.
Okay, I don't agree with that, but it might be. I just don't recall. I mean, in my career, Schalge has retired and introduced more Deadbolts than I want to keep count of.
Right.
If the B60 is a grade 1, great. Grade 1 is what I would suggest. Whatever, call it whoever the manufacturer is.
And so then if I wanted to, I could send that to you, that lock, and you put spool. That's one of the 562, even though it's grade 2, has some security pins in it. Whereas the 62, the grade 1 lock, has no security pins in it. So if I sent that to you, that might be something that you'd be able to do then?
Oh, I can do that. You would buy the Deadbolt from me and I would ship it with spool pins.
Done already. Okay. Got it. I understand. Okay. That sounds like a reasonable thing for me to do. The other thing is I know Schalge has their own restrictions on what the pin difference can be for adjacent pins. So I picked a bitting, if you will, that meets their criteria, can't be more than 7 spaces different. So I picked a bitting pattern that might work. And also regarding that, in terms of 5, 6, and 7 pins, does that make any difference to you?
So back to the first thing, why would you be defining a bitting? Why would you be saying this is what I want the bitting to be?
Good question. Because the ones that, supposedly the ones that I read that come from the manufacturer, they're close to each other and therefore more susceptible to bumping.
What ships out of the manufacturer is in a 5-pin system in Schalge obverse, classic obverse, single shear line, you're going to have in a 5-pin 1024 theoretical combinations. In a 6-pin, it's 4096. It's just an additional exponent to get to 7-pin, which Schalge doesn't make. So when they ship out their deadbolts, it's just I can't say that it's random, but it's a random, one lock to the next. It's a random bidding that observes, that obeys what you refer to, what we call MACS, M-A-C-S, maximum adjacent cut specification. You're right, Schalge is 7, so I can't have a 1 and a 9 cut next to each other. But I can have a 1 and an 8 cut. Now, if it was me, what you should do is go to my YouTube channel and find my video on what makes a good master key, because I really address that, where I like to have a shallower pin at the bow, but I like to have a guard pin in the second to last chamber. So like a long one with a short one. That kind of helps defeat picking. But you got to understand, people that can pick locks, this is not going to fool them. So it'll stop me because I don't have that skill. There are people that can hear an E string on the bass and tune to it, that minority. And then there's the rest of us. So I'm the rest of us when it comes to lock picking. So, you know what? If you want to define the bidding, you can, if you feel confident that you possess the knowledge to do so, knowing, though, that it won't matter in the end, other than to suit maybe your desire to have the bidding you want. And it will increase the cost to a certain extent, albeit marginally.
Yeah, see, I was... what I wrote and what I say to you now is I am far less concerned about lock picking. I don't have the kind of assets. I think if a lock picker was coming to a house, they'd target a house that they knew had something that was worth their time and effort to do that, as opposed to the random burglar who just kick in the door, like you said, who might just snatch and grab whatever is available, having made that noise. A lock picker, if they're going to have that skill, they've got a target in mind. And I don't have that, so I'm not really concerned about lock picking. I am concerned about lock bumping, as I said. So having you change the pins to mushroom pins and spool pins would probably be adequate, and that would certainly be better than the stock lock that I'm getting. In addition to that, there's maybe if you would consider the bidding, although I might want to reverse what I had because you were talking about shallow in the front, deeper in the back. I'd want to defer to you and do it that way.
Well, what I said was the second to last I like to use a longer pin. The industry calls it a guard pin, but it's not going to matter at the end of the day.
Well, you're right. It won't matter for picking. It might matter for bumping because of the way. Putting in a high tension spring, is that something that you would do?
No, because you're going to have the components in that cylinder based on how the manufacturer engineered it. You're not going to monkey with any of that stuff. You'll void the warranty. You'll serve the premature failure of the Bible, which is the top part of the cylinder, the shell. I can do any of that. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't do it. I mean, meaning I wouldn't provide it to you that way.
Okay, so then let me just ask you about the Medico that you sell, that 11JC63L. I don't know if you remember every single model number off the top of your head. There's so many of them. That had the captive key. It's a commercial deadbolt, bi-level, double-cylinder captive key. Seems like a great choice for the glass doors that I have, where I could just take the key out when I went on vacation or was away for an extended time. Do you have any thoughts about that particular lock?
I think you're spending a lot of money needlessly. Bi-level's been outside of patent protection for a long time. many, many years. I actually met Peter Field, is one of the two names on the patent for not only that, but the Medico 3 as well. Just what a ridiculously generous human being. There's not under patent protection. It's theoretically possible someone can get keys. I can sell you biaxial keys. Anyone, in fact. A captive deadbolt. I think if that's what you want, you probably just simply want to look at the Kaba Ilko 4500 series platform, because you can get a deadbolt that is modular with mortar cylinders. You can do a captive key on the inside. We can add spool pins to it, and then select a keyway that's just uncommon. Get a Schalge FG keyway or a Schalge F keyway. Who's walking around with those? Not many people. Well, actually, someone could use a all section blank, but we're talking about if a butterfly flaps its wings.
Yeah, exactly. So you are completely on my wavelength, and I appreciate the time that you spent with me in this phone call. So in terms of that Kaba Ilko 4500 series, I can find that on your website and write to you about that one?
Yes. If you type in Kaba Ilko deadbolt in my site, you'll find it. You'll find additional resources on it. I believe that's a grade 1 deadbolt. And it's nice because it's modular in the sense that those are just mortar cylinders that go in there. So let's say in 5 years, you're like, you know what? No. I want that multi-lock MTL 800. I want that platform. It's got patent protection till 2039. I can get it from Rich, keyed how I want. No one's going to copy that key ever. I got a card that is required to get keys cut, and only 2 CNC machines will actually cut keys, Rich's and then the factory back in Israel. So, you know what I mean? You can do small format. You can do full size, large format. You can do something goofy, like a Falcon H key or a P keyway from Falcon, something not restricted, but no one's got the key blank. If you walk into a locksmith, they're not going to have it. So I've done that a lot in the past myself. I used to just use a Falcon P, and my customers would come back and say, hey, man, I need these keys cut. I went to Ace and they couldn't copy it. I'm thinking in my head, yeah, I did that by choice. I want you coming back to me. This is Locksmithing 101, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay, so given everything that we've talked about, is there a reasonably cost-effective way to get 3 locks from you that would accomplish what it is you and I were talking about?
Well, what's the budget? Is it less than $400? If it is, then the answer is no chance. There's not no chance, but you want double cylinder deadbolts, 80. It's probably going to be $500, something in that range.
Yeah. I was thinking, I was trying to keep it at $150 a lock.
Those Everest XP or whatever you called out, those cores alone are going to break the budget. You need to combinate them. You then need to cut keys for them. So any pricing you're seeing is probably for an uncombinated core only. I mean, cut keys for those things are $10, $15, $20, something like that. So it's, I would first put spool pins, and then I would see what you want to do, because that'll be inexpensive. You could almost do it yourself, but the knowledge isn't hard to acquire online, but you do need the spool pins, which you could probably buy from your local locksmith. But you need a couple of other tools that without them, you need a plug follower. You're going to have that. So that you'd have to get your hands on. But, a little bit of knowledge might allow you to really keep the cost down if you're willing to do the work. And you're not going to put more than 3 spool pins. You would absolutely not want to put more than 4 for sure. But I would probably keep it to 3.
Okay. So what I will do is I'm going to spend some time on your website and then maybe write to you again and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Yeah, that's awesome. Very good. Well done.
Thank you for spending the time with me, Rich. And hopefully, and I'm pretty sure, we're going to be talking again.
Hopefully I get this work truck started that I'm trying to jump while we're on the phone together.
Well, good luck with that, really.
Yeah. All right, sir. I'll talk to you soon.
Right
yes,
on. Bye now.
Thank you.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.